the continuity between Judaism and Christianity, continuity in Matthew, fulfillment of the law. Perhaps Matthew's most emphatic affirmation of continuity is found in the passage where Jesus affirms to have not come to abolish, but to fulfill the law and the prophets, Matthew 5:17-20. In light of the antitheses of verse 21 to 48, to fulfill appears to mean to clarify, to explain the meaning of the law and the prophets. Repeatedly in Matthew, Jesus acts as the supreme interpreter of the law who attacks the external obedience and some of the halakhic traditions. Matthew 15, verse 3-6, 9-13, Matthew 12:7, and Matthew 23, 1-39. To fulfill could also refer to the prophetic realization of the law and the prophets in the life and ministry of Christ. This would imply an element of discontinuity, which has led some to conclude that the law and the prophets came to an end in the life, death, and resurrection of Christ. This interpretation goes too far because verse 18 affirms that the law would be valid till heaven and earth pass away. This expression clearly goes beyond the earthly ministry of Christ. In the light of the foregoing considerations, we conclude that Matthew sees in Christ not the termination of the law and the prophets, but their realization and continuation. We might say that in Matthew, the law and the prophets live on in Christ, who clarifies and in some cases intensifies their teachings. Matthew 5:21-22 and verse 27-28. Continuity and discontinuity in Hebrews. The book of Hebrews provides valuable insights into the manner in which the tension between continuity and discontinuity was being resolved in the New Testament times. The book suggests that the sense of continuity with the Old Testament was so profound that some Christians, Hellenistic Jews, according to F.F. Bruce, actually returned to the practice of their ancestral Jewish faith and Jewish liturgy to counteract the influence of Jewish sacrificial cultus. The order shows the superiority of Christ over the angels, Moses, and the priesthood. The last of the three is discussed at great length in chapter 7-10 of Hebrews. Apparently, the Jewish sacrificial cultus still exercise a great attraction upon these Christians. Discontinuity in Hebrews. The author of Hebrews emphasizes the discontinuity brought about by the coming of Christ. When he says that if perfection had been attainable through the Levitical priesthood, Hebrews 7:11, if therefore perfection were by the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people received the law, what further need was there that another priest should rise after the order of Melchizedek and not be called after the order of Aaron? There would have been no need for Christ to come. But because the priest, the sanctuary and its services were symbolic, Hebrews 9 and verse 9 and Hebrews 8 and verse 5, who served unto the example and shadow of heavenly things, as Moses was admonished of God when he was about to make the tabernacle. For see, said he, that thou make all things according to the pattern showed to thee in the mount. They would not in themselves perfect the conscience of the worshipper. Consequently, it was necessary for Christ to come once for all at the end of the age to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. The effect of Christ's coming described as setting aside, making obsolete, Hebrews 8 and 13, abolishing, Hebrews 10 and 9, all the Levitical services associated with the sanctuary. Some have interpreted these affirmations as indicating a radical abrogation of the Old Testament law in general and the Sabbath in particular. Such an interpretation ignores the statement in question are found in chapters 7 through 10, which deal with the Levitical sacrificial regulations. Though the author uses in these chapters the term the law and the covenant, Hebrews 8:7, Hebrews 8 and 8, and Hebrews 8:13, he mentions them with reference to the Levitical priesthood and services. It is in this context, that is, as they relate to the Levitical ministry, that they are declared as abolished. Hebrews 10 and verse 9. But this declaration can hardly be taken as a blanket statement for the abrogation of the law in general. Continuity in Hebrews. Note should be taken to the fact that Hebrews teaches not only discontinuity but also continuity. The latter is expressed in a variety of ways. There is continuity in the revelation which the same God spoke of old to our fathers by the prophets, and now in these last days has spoken to us by a Son. There is a continuity in the faithfulness and accomplishments of Moses and Christ. There is continuity in the redemptive ministry offered typologically in the earthly sanctuary by priests and realistically in the heavenly sanctuary by Christ himself. There is continuity in faith and hope, as New Testament believers share in the faith and promises of the Old Testament were these. More specifically, there is continuity in the Sabbatismos, a term used in a technical way by Plutarch, Justin, Epiphanius, apostolic constituents to designate Sabbath observance which remains, literally is left behind for the people of God. It is noteworthy that while the author declares the Levitical priesthood and services are abolished, Hebrews 10 and 9, obsolete and ready to vanish away, Hebrews 8 and 13, he explicitly teaches that a Sabbath keeping is left behind for the people of God, Hebrews 4 and 9. Further considerations will be given to the significance of Hebrews 4 and 9 in chapter 4. For the present, it suffices to note that Hebrews endeavors to clarify between the continuity and discontinuity brought about by the coming of Christ. The Levitical priesthood, the temple, and its services are proclaimed to be terminated by the coming of Christ. But other aspects of the law, such as the Sabbath rest, are declared to be left behind for the people of God. The above discussion of the continuity and discontinuity of the law in the New Testament is incomplete, since we have considered only a few representative writers. The writing of Paul, where the tension between continuity and discontinuity is especially present, will be considered separately in chapter 6 and 7 in conjunction with the apostles' attitude toward the law in general and the Sabbath in particular. Yet the representative writings we have examined do reveal the presence in the New Testament of a strong perception of continuity with the Old Testament religious heritage. We have seen that the earliest converts were predominantly Jews and God-fearers, who were very zealous in the observance of the law. Acts 21 and 20. They saw in Christ the fulfiller of the law in the sense of the one who clarified its meaning and realized its promises. Gradually, they perceived that certain aspects of the law, such as those relating to the Levitical ministry, had become obsolete by the coming of Christ. We have found no indication, however, that this perception led Christians to doubt or to negate the value and validity of such moral aspects of the law as the principle of Sabbath keeping. Additional support for this conclusion